Item 3A, police.
We have 3A through E or consent. We can go through them each if you want to touch on them, ma'am, or we can just, if there's questions, we can take them. It's however you'd like to do it, ma'am.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that was consent. So Councilmember Zvonek, do you, anything that you want to say to 3E? Saying no, I can't hear you.
Yeah, no. Can you hear me okay, Jason?
Yes, sir.
Item 4A, police auditor.
Great, thank you. So good morning, Michelle Crawford here. I'm going to be giving an overview for the fourth quarter update. Let me just share presentation. And can you guys see the full screen?
I don't see anything.
We just see you, Michelle.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Negative.
Do I have share permissions?
You do, Michelle.
Okay. And can we see it now? If not, I'll just go ahead and go through it verbally.
Yeah, go ahead and start verbally. We can't.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that, guys. So just a quick overview. Currently in progress are 2 engagements. The first one is the Unified Metropolitan Forensic Crime Lab. That reviews on the NIBIN process, and that is wrapping up and in reporting stages. The next engagement will be calls for service, and I'll go over that in a little bit of detail in a minute. The 2023 audit plan engagement selection process, including a risk assessment and interviews and meetings with city management and the police department and consent decree monitor to identify potential engagements. Coming from that risk assessment was some risk observations that will not be audits included in the plan, but are included in the plan for awareness for management to pay attention to. Those include staffing, policy governance, use of force, the disciplinary process, leadership, technology, and the records unit operations. I am aware of some of the efforts within APD to address those areas, and I'll continue to monitor those efforts. For the 2023 audit plan, there are 4 engagements on the plan. The first engagement, which is now beginning, is calls for service. The objective of this engagement is to determine the level of efficiency and effectiveness of APD's response to certain calls for service, including alternate responses. The next 3 engagements for the plan aren't in any particular order. The first one is body-worn camera follow-up part 2. This will be a follow-on to part 1 that was completed in October 2022. This engagement will be pending implementation of some of those other recommendations and some of the technology solutions before it will begin. The objectives for body-worn camera part 2 are determine if Aurora Police complies with policies and regulations regarding body-worn camera use, and determine the extent to which Aurora Police is utilizing the body-worn camera system for monitoring compliance. The next engagement to go over is promotion, selections, and assignments, and this is a carry forward from the 2022 audit plan. This is focusing on those areas in which the chief has discretion. The objectives include determine if policies exist for selections and assignments, including time and position, and if policies follow leading practices. Determine the effectiveness, efficiency, and equity of the processes for promotion, selections, and assignments, and determine if practices exist to evaluate performance for personnel selected or assigned to their positions. And the 4th engagement on the plan is training, and the objective for that engagement is to determine the level to which APD complies with training requirements and the degree of quality therein. The audit plan is included on the city's website along with a backup, and I am available if there are any specific questions on ongoing engagements or those 4 audits on the plan.
So I have one question regarding the crime lab. Are you looking in that audit? Are you looking at, because I know it's outsourced now. So are you looking at like what our turnaround times were for DNA, fingerprints, stuff like that for evidence? Is that what you're comparing on how when we had the crime lab in-house?
So this engagement was a special request from the police department and the board. So it is specifically looking at the NIBIN firearms process, and it was a very limited process review just to processing those NIBIN firearms. There are some other observations and there's some tie-in to when DNA and latent prints you go through, but it was really a limited scope and review to just that firearm process for Aurora, Arapahoe, Douglas, and the lab to identify efficiencies in order to increase the turnaround time to get those things processed more efficiently and effectively.
Okay, do my colleagues Sundberg or Zvonek, do you have any?
I do. Michelle, you talked about in one of the audits looking at the promotion process. I know that we have a charter review board, and I would just, and maybe this is part of the plan, is looking at places where the charter creates some inflexibility around promotions, particularly denying them. And so I think just recognizing if there is something that we need to do that's a charter change, knowing that and having that go through the charter review board or committee would be helpful.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Thanks, Michelle. Item 4B, public safety partnership.
I'm sorry, it was hard to hear. What was this topic? Was it the
This is
public focus deterrence?
all you. That's
All right, thank you. You're a little hard to hear, council member, just sorry. All right, so I'm going to have Mike Hannafin pull up a PowerPoint and share it with us.
Yeah, so I have it up on my end in share. Are you able to see that?
No.
Captain Hannafin, go ahead and do it from the bottom again.
Yep, doing it from the bottom, sharing screen and audio.
There we go. All right, so this topic is about focus deterrence. It stems from our public safety partnership. I know I've discussed that in the past a little bit, what that's about, but just as a really quick recap, it's a federal program that we applied for in 2020. We were accepted into it. 10 sites were selected. We were one of those sites. And the gist of it is that these cities and agencies throughout the nation are selected because they're dealing with violent crime, and the federal government brings to bear some of their resources to help us find some innovative ways to help combat violent crime within the city, and partner with all of our federal, state, and local partners to find ways to combat violent crime. And one of the issues we've been dealing with specifically was youth violence. So within this program, we actually did a youth violence assessment. That assessment report came out. I believe that was shared with everyone here. And it kind of gave us some parameters for demographics as far as age range, that we're actually dealing with a very small group of our juvenile population that is involved in violent crime, but it's a very impactful group. And then it also had some recommendations to move forward. So with that, we kind of take that, what came out of that and the results of that assessment, and we look at how we can use that and what programs or frameworks we can create within the city that would help us be effective in reducing violent crime, but specifically within our youth population. As we all know, Councilmember Lawson had an initiative with the city to have the youth violence prevention program started through the city. And one of the things we recognized is there was not an intentional disconnect, but there really wasn't this fusion between the police department and the city side to figure out how we can partner together in order to combat youth violence, using what we bring to bear and also what the city and their social services will have, and referrals and things of that nature to get our youth population off the track of violence. So through this public safety partnership, Chief Oates, through one of his contacts through PSP, we all learned about this focus deterrence program. It's being implemented in several cities across the nation. It's a research and evidence-based program that's had success when it's implemented properly. if it's not implemented in a comprehensive way, it will fail. But what we recognize is this is a framework and a model that we can use within the city of Aurora, we believe, to have an effect on violent crime and specifically within our youth population. And it also created a bridge between the police department and the youth violence prevention program, and how we can work together under this framework to be very effective and have a good model moving forward where we each understand our roles, from when social services need to be brought to bear and when the full weight of the criminal justice system needs to be involved in this, and how that works. So there's a lot to the Focused Deterrence program, and what we did within the police department is we dedicated Captain Mike Hannafin to kind of be the lead champion for this within the agency. So he's taken the lead on this. He's been selected to as his primary job duty is to work on the implementation of focused deterrence. On the youth violence prevention side, through the city services, Joe DeHerrera was hired as the new youth violence prevention program manager, and both of them are going to be working together in concert to try to get this program off the ground through the city. The one thing I will say is and probably the most important part to this is that we need every stakeholder to be committed to this moving forward, because if there's one important stakeholder that isn't completely committed to this, that's where we run into issues and the program can potentially fail. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe DeHerrera now, who's going to talk about the youth violence prevention program role in this focused deterrence model, and then Captain Mike Hannafin will continue the conversation with the police department's role in this. And then if there's any questions before if I turn it over to them, please feel free to ask those now. If not, I'll let Joe take over.
Awesome. Thanks, Chief Hildebrand. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So again, Joseph DeHerrera, manager of the Youth Violence Prevention Program. So what I wanted to do before Captain Mike Hannafin steps in is just kind of give some history on the Youth Violence Prevention Program. So as a reminder, the strategic plan for the Youth Violence Prevention Program was adopted in May of 2022. And these two bullet points are really some of the main focuses. So we recognize as a city that there are impacts of youth violence, and we are wanting to work and making this work city-supported, community-led, and youth-informed with our Youth Advisory Council, with our partners within the community, partnerships with the schools, so on and so forth. We recognize as youth violence prevention, the addressing youth violence can't be done with just my program, with just police, with just the community. It really is going to take all of us working together collaboratively to minimize and really solve the root of youth violence. So this is we're just going to talk about how the PSP studies, public safety partnership that Chief Hildebrand mentioned, as well as the strategic plan for youth violence kind of coincide with one another. So next slide, please, Captain. So as a reminder, the mission of the Youth Violence Prevention Program is to enhance public safety to reduce the impact of youth violence in Aurora communities. We do this through a comprehensive and proactive public health approach, inclusive of youth, community partners, partner agencies, and city leaders by addressing key risk factors. So there's a lot of components, even within our mission statement, that play right into this focused deterrence model, as well as the public safety partnership recommendations. Next slide, please. So I touched on this a little bit when I presented a study session last month, but as Chief Hildebrand mentioned, the Public Safety Partnership held some stakeholder interviews. They came in and they gained insights, perspectives from about 31 individuals, including law enforcement, system stakeholders, so local government officials, juvenile justice, school officials, and then community and service providers as well. So faith-based organizations, social services, nonprofits, health officials, and then just various community or businesses within the community. Next slide, please. Really from all of our stakeholders that were interviewed, this is the top needs that came out of that. So more collaboration and trust. So basically all stakeholders working together, that collaboration piece. more safe spaces for youth and things for them to do in those safe spaces, more and better options for youth involvement in violence, more services for troubled youth and their families. So looking more at not just the youth, but how can we provide more holistic services to the families and kind of break that recurring cycle as much as possible. And then an improved relationship between the police and the community. And then the overall trends that they found in the city of Aurora for violence, that serious violent crime is trending up in Aurora. As Chief Hildebrand mentioned, there is kind of a very specific age range that we're finding. So 18 to 25 is the age range where the group that is most involved in the violence. For Black males, the risk of being a homicide victim is 16 times higher than for all other Aurora residents. And then violence is concentrated typically in 3 to 5 police beats. And then this slide, so this probably looks familiar from study session, but these are the 11 recommendations that came out of the assessment from Public Safety Partnership. And what we wanted to do here is highlight the 6 on here that really more align with the focused deterrence model that we're working towards, and then also youth violence. So those 6 are to increase crime analysis capacity, collaboration and partnership to identify and implement law enforcement strategies, support street outreach and violence interruption programs, enhance police community relationships and trust in high violence areas, and then enhance collaboration and coordination among all stakeholders. So again, police, the city, the community, nonprofits, all of those. And then to also continue in continuing the success to evaluate those strategies and the programs that we have at play. So with that, I will hand it over to Captain Hannafin so he can get into a little bit more of the details of focused deterrence.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. And apologize here. I just X'd out for a moment so I can try to activate my camera here. All right, I apologize. I'm not able to get my camera there. Can you still see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So with these next series of slides, I'm just going to give you a broad overview of what a focused deterrence program looks like. And then we'll go through some just some aspects and components. I'll show you a powerful 3-minute video of what a call-in procedure looks like, where the program stakeholders confront the violent offenders in the community. We'll take a look at some of the effectiveness in other cities around the country, and then we'll talk about some next steps. So focused deterrence is a crime reduction strategy that carefully selects the most prolific violent offenders in the community, who then receive concentrated law enforcement attention. Once you identify the offender, you then identify their social group that they are connected with. Focused deterrence is distinctly different from traditional law enforcement response to crime. The traditional response would largely be reactive to crime, whereas focused deterrence is more proactive. Your focused deterrence program simultaneously and genuinely offers concrete, concentrated social services through direct and repetitive communication with the offender and their social network group. It also employs rigorous follow-up and case management services to ensure accountability for commitments made. By utilizing analytics, the focused deterrence model seeks to identify and map the social network of the targeted prolific offender. As I mentioned, those who tend to commit a disproportionate amount of violent crime are socially connected within groups. So the goal then is to leverage those group members to achieve positive peer influence upon the group and that particular specific offender. The objective is not necessarily to arrest, but rather convince the offender to comply with the law going forward, And if they do, we'll commit to providing social services support to increase the likelihood that they will not reoffend. Whereas in the traditional law enforcement response, you more so solely rely upon identifying the offender, making the arrest, and then cooperating with prosecution. Through the focused deterrence program, the targeted offender is identified and formally notified through a scripted and coordinated call-in procedure, which we'll look at here in just a few minutes. And we basically let them know that they are now receiving the full focused attention of law enforcement partners. Stakeholders firmly but respectfully notify them that their acts of violence will no longer be tolerated by the community. The call-in procedure is collaborative with stakeholders, everyone playing a crucial role and having an important voice in that process. The offender is essentially warned that for any further acts of violence, there is certainty that they're going to be caught and the punishment will be swift and severe. And that approach is rooted in deterrence theory. The offender has to believe that they're going to get caught, and with certainty, and that the punishment is severe to deter the behavior. It is also equally important to convey to the offender that they can get themselves removed from the focused deterrence program, kind of that microscope, so to speak, and no longer be the focus of that concentrated attention, as long as they comply and uphold the commitments they make. So in other words, focused deterrence is not a life sentence, so to speak. The offender does make their own choice. Some of the aspects sorry, did somebody have something?
Oh, go ahead.
All right, so some of the aspects of the program, you first start by understanding what our violence problem is and what groups are responsible. So as I said, your most violent and prolific offenders in any community are typically a very small percentage, but that recidivism is high. These individuals all have their own social networks or groups that they frequently associate with. Focused deterrence initiatives target these offenders and their social networks. An academic researcher tells you what your violence problem is and who those individuals are. However, the role of the researcher goes beyond the data. They really need to get to know our Aurora community by having that boots on the ground approach, participating in ride-alongs, focus group meetings, and we'll have a little bit more on the research component in just a moment. So how do we ID the offenders and the groups for targeted focused deterrence? Essentially, we're going to develop a fixed set of person group evaluation categories. And what that might look like is, was a person a habitual offender? Are they linked to a NIBIN case? Did they have any involvement in a non-fatal shooting or a homicide in the past 2 to 3 years? What is their likelihood of retaliation if they were the victim of crime? And then obviously we want to know about prior weapon possession cases. So those are just some examples of how you look at offenders. And then you essentially assign a score to these different categories and come up with a number. And then you decide as a program what that number is going to be to then triage somebody for focused deterrence. And then and the whole point of that is a focused deterrence program is not arbitrary. You know, it is very specific. There are program parameters and things that you're looking at, which helps you to establish trust and legitimacy outwardly in the community. Again, these are not arbitrary or random selections of offenders, which could be which you can see more in a traditional law enforcement response when reacting to crime in areas or neighborhoods. So selecting the prolific offender for the list is objectively fair and lawful based on frequency and or severity of the criminal behavior and their influence on others. The focused deterrence program has to be steadfast in that principle and establish a regular audit process to ensure and promote that public accountability and trust to so the public knows that we are following the program parameters, and it is a very fair system of evaluation. To be most effective with resources, your focused deterrence program offender list should ideally be no more than about 25 to 40 offenders at a time. You probably want to start more on that lower end as you get up and running and comfortable with a program. And remember too that these are the worst of the worst violent offenders in the community, often those trigger pullers who make the focused deterrence list. Your target offenders are essentially compelled to show up for call-ins as you're going to utilize various different levers. This is also somewhat referred to as a lever approach to gain compliance. In other words, a lever could be associated to bail conditions, probation or parole mandates, family member persuasion, public housing revocation, and things like that. So you certainly want to get your moral community voice liaisons and some of your reform advocates involved in that process. Certainly clergy and church can have an influence. So all of those types of things can be utilized to compel offenders to come in for these meetings. During that call-in, each criminal justice agency, social provider, and community moral voice advocate that is represented in the group specifies the action it is prepared to take against that prolific offender in their group if the behavior persists. And again, we're going to see a little a 3-minute video that demonstrates that. If the offender declines the offer for social services support to change behavior and elects to commit further acts of violence, then the focused deterrence program refers that case filing to the applicable judicial system for swift prosecution. And we're going to expect that there's going to be severe consequences upon conviction. The judicial system is a very key prominent stakeholder in this program for that purpose. Two distinct features of the focused deterrence program. You have that special assistance that's offered to the prolific offender, and it's contingent on their ceasing violence and that prolific offending in the community. The specific services offered, they are genuine and they're going to meet their needs. So it's not necessarily a blanket set of services. We're going to be finding out what their specific needs are to help that individual rather than that standardized array of services. And then all services for a program here in Aurora would have to be researched and deemed effective by the program managers. And then having a dedicated caseworker embedded in the focused deterrence program is really essential to monitor progress and effectiveness of those social services. And then also taking accountability for those promises made. So, and I really believe that the caseworker plays an integral role in determining when that focused deterrence microscope comes off of that offender. So really important part of the program. So in terms of social services, what does that look like? So some examples of the social service programs utilized successfully in other cities include some of those already existing programs or provisions that are really embedded in the community. Specific uniquely, Aurora social services and support programs, that's something that we would have to develop during our implementation phase. But as you can see, some of those examples are the life coaching, the job and interview training, maybe employment placing, the substance abuse and mental health treatment, housing, mentoring. So those are just some examples of what we're talking about in terms of trying to, help that offender be sustainable with different life choices. So I want to go ahead and play this video here for you. It's about 3 minutes. It is YouTube, so I'll have to get past the initial commercial segment. And I just want to warn you that it may be a little startling at first for some of you, but it is a pretty powerful video that shows how your stakeholders confront the violent offender. So let me just try to pull that up here. And is everyone able to see that okay?
Yes.
All right.
Don't shoot! I want to grow up!
Kansas City No Violence Alliance would like to thank you for coming today. It signifies a community coming together and taking any path necessary to reduce violence in our community.
This is personal to me. My best friend was killed November 11th, 2011, within a few days of me being appointed chief. He's my best friend since we were 12.
I'd like you to think about how many times in your life you've heard the prosecutor say, I'm offering you a different path. What we're asking you to do is take hold of this opportunity that's being offered to you. We're not even asking you to go out and find the services yourself. We're bringing them to you, right here, on your lap.
I've got a new motto. That new motto is if we can make it, we're going to take it.
You have to accept responsibility for the actions that you chose. We know who you are. We know what activity you're involved in, and we're going to come after you if you don't change.
2 years ago, if I'd have had this choice, man, I wouldn't have went through all that I went through. I missed all my 30s and most of my 40s in prison. Today, man, I want to say, man, I care. I love you, man.
Don't make excuses for your situation that you're in. You are where you are. Have the courage to stand up against the violence.
We care about the violence that's going on. I got a 7-year-old son. I won't let go play outside by himself because I'm afraid about what might happen.
You're a decision away from either me having to assist your family or having to assist the family that you've been involved with and killing.
I forgive them because I want them to have a chance, just like I'm asking you all.
I don't go through a day without thinking about my baby. Mother, I'm the very only son, 17. 11 days before he turned 18. Didn't get to go to senior prom. Didn't get to walk across stage senior year. I had to walk for him. First feeling in the world.
You know better, so do better. You bumped your head the first time. It was a hiccup in the road. Do better. Don't let this be the outcome for your children and your family. Leave a legacy. I challenge you to have the courage to stand up, to change your life. Today, take the services that are offered to you.
Man, I don't want to look in the paper. I don't want to watch the news and see none of y'all going to jail or being buried.
Don't leave here today with the same mindset you had when you came in. I hope that the messages that you've heard made a difference. If you exact violence on this community, understand this. And understand my resolve. We will prosecute you.
Have you considered going solar in Colorado, but
All right, so let me get back to the PowerPoint here. So that just gives you an idea of what that call-in procedure looks like. As you can see, it's very powerful, a lot of voices, a lot of really important community stakeholders involved in that process. Excuse me. So let's talk about governance here. The success of any focused deterrence violence reduction program relies on that collaboration, dedication, and commitment by all stakeholders for that sustainability. This is not a quote unquote police department initiative. This can be best surmised as a multi-sector task force, including elected officials, law enforcement agencies, service providers, and those community representatives. The working group of the key stakeholders in what an Aurora focused deterrence program would look like consist of, but certainly not limited to, City of Aurora Youth Violence Prevention Program, APD, city, county, and U.S. prosecutors, some federal law enforcement partners like ATF and FBI, probation and parole, and then some of our elected officials, social service providers, and then those moral community voices, some selected nonprofits, clergy, and anti-violence advocacy groups. Although a focused deterrence program is uniquely tailored to its specific city and needs, they generally consist of a governing board. Obviously, that's important. And then you have multiple subcommittees that are established by the governing board who carry out the work of the focused deterrence program goals and objectives. In a traditional focused deterrence model, those subcommittees consist of an implementation committee, a data committee, an enforcement committee, and then you have the social services committee, and then a messaging committee. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Each city tailors the program and the subcommittees to their specific needs. The governing board is generally comprised of your high-level department or agency directors and elected officials. Those governing board members are the individuals who can make decisions, allocate resources, ensure deliverables, and assign personnel to subcommittees from their respective department or agency. They'll also be responsible for brandishing a uniquely Aurora program name. And then you want to develop that program vision and mission statement through your governing board so that you can establish measures of accountability and progress. And then by design, your governing board are those influential members who must be able to work through barriers to this type of program. So let's talk about, does it work? So in a publication from about February of 2016, Harvard researchers Thomas Att and Christopher Winship completed a systematic meta-review summarizing and analyzing evidence concerning violent crime strategies across policing that were intended to specifically reduce youth violence. They reviewed place-based, people-based, and behavior-based strategies. So the focused deterrence program, what you're looking at there, that's considered a people-based strategy. And what they found based on that research was focused deterrence has the largest direct impact on crime and violence by far, that is a quote from them, of any other intervention they studied. Now, a meta-analysis examines all the reported results of a research study on a particular approach and then summarizes those results. They're generally considered to be the most rigorous and scientifically validated. And although randomized control trials were not conducted, 9 of the 10 interventions substantially reduced crime and violence. Homicides specifically experienced reductions within the range of 34 to 64%, depending on the program and city. The authors did imply that focused deterrence distinguishes itself from other strategies with a laser-like focus on specific prolific offender groups and those specific behaviors that it seeks to change. And one of the most powerful components is that the specific message delivered to these groups about their behavior and the stakeholders confronting them. As I talked about before, focused deterrence is also referred to as pulling levers. Those strategies are highly targeted interventions on your most prolific and dangerous offenders. They're not broadly diffused across large populations or large areas, again, in contrast to a more traditional law enforcement reaction and response to crime. And that is why the focused deterrence strategies tend to garner more trust and legitimacies within communities as a proactive response. Some historical effectiveness. I recently spoke to the program director in Baltimore City, Maryland. It's both a city and county, and they're different. So we specify there, this is Baltimore City. And he reported to me that throughout the year of 2022, Baltimore City reignited their focused deterrence initiative to specifically target group violence, homicides, and shootings. By year end, they achieved a 35% reduction in these group perpetrated violent crimes, and they deployed this in their most violent patrol district as a trial. Based on those results, they're now scaling this up to address crime in other parts of the city. One significant finding from their initial research that they did in evaluation was they thought their problem was youth based in that district. But what they found out was the average offender of gun crime offenses was by people 30 years of age. So that was a little bit surprising to them when they did their research. Since 1995, many cities have utilized focused deterrence models to combat crime. Looking at Boston, they looked at homicides, gun-related gun violence, and aggravated assault from 1995 to 2000. This data is a little bit older. They called it, their particular program is called Operation Ceasefire, and they experienced or reported a decline of 63% in youth gang violence related crime. Looking at Cincinnati, Ohio, from 2007 to 2010, they targeted gun-related violence. Their initiative achieved a 61% reduction in homicides involving high-risk youth offenders. And however, over time, that number decreased to about 35%. In Chicago, Illinois, from 2003 to 2004, they created the Chicago Violence Reduction Strategy to target gun violence. They reported a 37% reduction in homicides in targeted areas and a 34% reduction in shootings. And that data came from the Center for Problem-Oriented Policing, with the exception of Baltimore. I obtained that directly from their program director. So just to finish up here, the next steps. So utilizing our existing support and resource network available through the Public Safety Partnership Program to develop and build our uniquely Aurora focused deterrence model. We do understand this concept and this model on paper. It does have potential to significantly improve public safety within our community. However, our group that has been working on this, we feel to better understand the specific workings and aspects in real world application. We really want to go see a highly functioning focused deterrence program, do some site visits in some other cities to speak to those existing work groups and administrators that are deploying this in their cities. We currently are tentatively discussing site visits for early February, and that would be done through the PSP Peer Exchange Program. The National Network for Safe Communities at John Jay College, they are the experts in developing and implementing the national model for a focused deterrence program. So contracting with them for project management support throughout the first year of development and implementation is something we would like to entertain. Joe and I would then work collaboratively with the National Network for Safe Communities project manager to expeditiously and efficiently build out our Aurora specific group violence intervention model. Historically, focused deterrence initiatives require significant commitment and robust staffing resources. Certainly recognizing the current staffing challenges within the city and APD, our initial startup of staff is likely to be modest, but we do know, at least in initial evaluation, that 2 specific APD FTE ads would be necessary for initial startup, and that would consist of a additional crime analyst and an upgrade to the police agent rank to have a police agent liaison for the program to triage cases, to be that liaison with the district attorneys, the city attorney, and then also file any new cases that would be necessary for the program. The researcher is a critical and necessary first step of any focused deterrence program. The researcher has to analyze and understand our Aurora community and the violence problem. And then they also have a seat at the table and help design the right strategy to address our violence problem. But also, too, they have to evaluate the effectiveness. And that research partner would be recruited and selected through an RFP process as guided by our existing City of Aurora business rules. We then want to impanel our governing board, and we will certainly make recommendations for governing board members. So that kind of concludes the information I have as a general overview. But while we're discussing these next steps, I do want to invite Joe to come back into the conversation if he has any additional remarks from the youth violence prevention side.
Thanks, Captain. I just wanted to touch on the positions. There's nothing in addition to what we discussed last month in study session. So the reclassification for the positions under the youth violence program, the data analyst that I'm in the process of recruiting for, as well as a program coordinator, those are what we discussed last month in the study session. So there's not anything in addition to what we've already discussed and what's already been budgeted for on the youth violence side of things. And that was the only thing that I wanted to add, so we can open it up to questions for either Mark, Mike, or myself.
Okay, and thank you. I've already requested a condensed and to the point version of this. I feel like this program is way too important, for Aurora to be Aurora needs to be a good partner in this program. And that presentation really didn't have all the information in front of me. So I've already asked for a condensed version. So at this time, I don't have any questions until I can more thoroughly understand it. But if my colleagues have anything, go ahead.
I have a few comments and questions. So first, Joe, this is for you, and I know you inherited the YVP mission. It always makes me cringe, and I'll tell you why. I think it should be 6 words: to eliminate youth violence in Aurora. That's our mission, right? It's infinite. It's straight to the point. The way it reads now is we want to reduce the impact of it. No, we want to eliminate it. And I know that's Pollyannish in some ways, but that should always, whenever you set up an organization, the mission should be infinite and something we're striving for, and it should be aspirational. And then the rest of it after that, the other words are more tactics and strategies. And I'm very excited about, because I do see this focused deterrence as a strategy under the overall youth violence. And there's a number of tactics that are, I think, going to be very helpful. One of the things I think is going to be important, and I believe will be necessary to make it effective in Aurora and frankly anywhere in Colorado, and this is something, Captain Hannafin, I'd like to get your thoughts on, maybe not right now, but is with the arbitrary cap that we have on juvenile beds in the state. That's a policy decision, not actually based on what's available. I think that could be a roadblock for us as we're going and identifying. Again, this isn't just all juveniles. These are violent criminals. These are violent kids who are a real threat to themselves and to our community. And we have this state law that places arbitrary caps on the number of juvenile beds, which I think we need to eliminate in order to make this effective. And I hope that as a city, we will take a proactive position to eliminate that cap. We should never put our prosecutors and judges in a position to determine if they have to let a kid out on an ankle bracelet versus putting them in juvenile detention if they're violent criminals and a danger to themselves and our community. So I'd like to, get your thoughts on that at some point. And I think the next part is that our community, we hear a lot about how concerned they are all across the city on youth violence. It is heartbreaking when you hear violence, period. It's concerning to everybody. But then when you read the age of the kids, I had an opportunity recently to sit in on a force review board, and there was a young kid, and they showed the date of his birth date. He's a month older than my son. I'm not that old. My oldest son is 14 years old. This kid was 14 years old, and it's heartbreaking. And so I think that we need to do a better job of ensuring or letting the public know that this type of program is coming, and that we are going to have an intentional focus because I think that what the youth violence prevention program does is it's really focusing on those kids that quite haven't reached that level, and we don't want them to reach that level. So all of the programming and the support services that we're going to be working with to ensure that that there are kids out there, juveniles, who are potentially going to reach that threshold of violence, that they never get there. But for those who have, the fact that we're going to have an intentional, focused program to ensure that they're no longer victimizing our community, our residents need to know, and I want to see this brought forward in a more public venue than this meeting. And then the last thing I want to ask is just when it comes to establishing the governing board, who determines that? And I don't care who answers that, whoever has that information.
Yeah, so Councilmember Zvonek, to some of your questions there, we have had those conversations with District Attorney Kellner and Mason from the 17th and 18th. They were with us and/or had representatives with us in Tulsa when we went to the PSP Violence Reduction Summit last month. And Councilmember Lawson joined us on that trip, so we were thankful to have her with us. We did discuss the juvenile caps, the bed space issue. It is a concern, certainly, for them, and so that's something where it is something on our radar in terms of how do we address that, what do we do, and we are going to be very cautious about case referrals to the district attorneys with this type of program, because we can't overwhelm them, and they are limited. They have to make very difficult decisions every day, is what they relay to us based on these violent juvenile offenders and the bed space. For what an Aurora program would look like, we have already talked as a group. To start this program off, we would be focusing just on juveniles. The age range we talked about for a program like this is 15 to 25, but to get started and get this going, we talked about focusing just on juveniles. I think those were two of your questions. I'm sorry, was there one more thing, sir, that you wanted?
It was the establishing the governing board. I just wondered what does that process look like to get that going, and who makes the determinations on? Because I think that that's going to be important in terms of steering the direction of the program for the city.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's something where the working group, we would certainly bring that forward to city management. Mr. Batchelor obviously would be directly involved in those conversations, and then wherever it's directed at that point with Mr. Batchelor and the other high-level city stakeholders would determine that. As I said in the presentation, we have recommendations about offices that should be on that board and different types of officials, but certainly specifics can be worked out within the working group, and we'll bring that forward certainly through Mr. Batchelor.
Okay, that's all I had. Thanks.
Councilmember Sundberg, do you have anything?
Yes. Comment or two and a question. This work does seem proven and hopeful. What about the number of caseworkers that we have in place now? How many do we have? How many more do we need to wrap around these youth?
So thank you for the question, council member. So we have currently on the youth violence side, we don't have caseworkers right now. I'm in the process of putting an RFP out for contracting case management. The goal right now is to start with one case manager, potentially going up to two based on the need at that point.
Okay, thank you. And sort of echoing Councilmember Zvonek's words, using deterrence theory, a lever approach, let's just say everything is working well from preventative side, from the support side. And you mentioned taking swift action against prolific offenders for swift prosecution. You mentioned that this key stakeholder is the judicial system. So all of that is in place, and we're taking some extremely dangerous youth off the road, off the streets. I mean, we've seen youth that are 15, 16 years old willing to open fire on police and get in a gun battle, etc. But I think with respect to bed space, a key stakeholder in this whole thing should be the state legislature. So I don't know if we've reached out to a number of them that could be part of this entire discussion, and part of that is that something that's being considered?
Council member, can I take that? So I've had conversations with DA Kellner and DA Mason. DA Kellner is actually approaching the DA council for this specific issue to put some pressure on the legislature to revisit this. I just found out that the Colorado Department of Human Services has a board. They are pushing forward a recommendation, which is usually they're the opposite. They're trying to reduce bed space, but they've realized that it's been reduced to a level that is not, attainable and is not effective for the amount of violent juvenile, offenders that we have. So they're petitioning for a 10% increase in bed space with the ability to increase it another 10% without needing any approval based on their discretion. So that roughly is probably another 50 beds. I still think that's an inadequate number. I mean, we went down from 450 in 2017 to 215 in the state throughout the entire state bed space. So we've also, through the Pfizer committee meetings, I brought this very issue up. It was discussed. I think we are going to, because typically this happens right around July where these proposals come forward. They're asking for a special amendment to be made for this 10%, which I think is a good first step, but continue that conversation then again in June to get another increase if we can get the DA council involved, if the city can take a position and kind of follow along with the DA council, because they're probably the most impactful in getting legislatures to, take some of these issues very seriously. So I think there is a path forward, and we've had those conversations, but your points are very well taken. Our juvenile approach is very difficult because of the bed space. It's much easier with adults. So one of the things we've had conversations with the DAs about is if this is a focused deterrence, somebody that's within this program and they commit a crime, they have to be held we have to find the bed space. They are a priority to keep in. They have to know they're being kept in, and you do not want to be on the focused deterrence, that group list, because you will be held. And I think both DAs are very, they understand that concept. They obviously want to know more, just like Councilmember Jurinsky wants to know more about what the nuts and bolts of this looks like moving forward. But yes, I think that's everyone that we've had conversation with is very much on board. Even the chief judges in both the 17th and 18th Judicial District attended the presentation on focused deterrence and understood what we were trying to achieve here and had buy-in. So we've had a lot of people who are very excited about it, but actually getting it off the ground and implement it in a way that's going to work is the challenge we're facing right now. As far as the governing board, typically it has to be the heads. It has to be the DAs. It has to be the city manager, elected officials, whether that's the mayor or council members who sit on that governing board, because they have to be able to make the decisions. We have to be able to take recommendations to that board, and they need to have the power to say, yes, we're moving this direction, and you have our full support. So that's very critical. What I will tell you is when you see like some of those cities that they've had success, and then you see, well, what happened all the following years? What we've realized is that as priorities change in cities, this kind of falls off. It doesn't get the support that it had when it first started. So sustainability is something that we're sensitive to, and want to ensure that long after I'm gone and everyone that's very is seeing this as a priority after we leave, that it is sustainable and continues to be a priority for the city, because I think that's how it's going to be most effective moving forward.
Chief Hildebrand, I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm gonna have to jump in here. We are 45 minutes into agenda item. Again, for this to go to the public and to get the support that you're talking about and the sustainability for this, we need a clear, condensed version of this. I know that Councilmember Lawson does have a question. I'm going to give her a minute to ask her question. Go ahead.
Chair Jurinsky, I don't have a question. I just wanted to make a comment just really quickly, and I appreciate you allowing me to comment. I just wanted to say that I went to the PSP conference. I stand firm behind this program. We need to do something in this community regarding our youth. And I think what's going to be very important, is that the collaborations that we have, the partnerships are going to be important, and the buy-in and the help from my colleagues on this committee and on the council. So I think I just hope that, I'm glad that we're going to try to implement this program. I think it's effective. There's been a lot of stories that have been told when I went to that conference, And I just hope that my colleagues will be supportive in the initiative, because we do have an issue in this community, and this is not political. This is something that we have to address. It is an issue in the community. So I just wanted to just state that. Thank you for allowing me to have the time.
I agree. And with that, thanks for the presentation. We're going to go ahead and move on to item 4C, Jason Batchelor, Public Safety Action Plan Update.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So item 1, staffing, you've got the backup, both in item 3A, as well as some more details in terms of how we're staffed. Bottom line, through the end of December, we were still down 54 positions. So we are at 54 vacancies. And you see the numbers. So any questions on our staffing or training plan?
Jason, I have one question. I know that we're coming close to a point where we're going to bump up against the cap set by our charter in terms of the number of laterals versus basics. Do you have an idea of where we are relative to that?
No, I think we've got, given the number of vacancies we've got, I think we've got some room. We're continuing to very aggressively pursue laterals. We do have a lateral class starting here, and it's certainly not the numbers we would like in terms of dozens of officers, but we are getting a small handful of officers. I think it's 6 that are going to start. And the good news is we think those folks are going to be good ambassadors for us moving forward as we continue to aggressively pursue. I don't have the exact cap on top of my head, but I'll find out for you and give it to you, sir.
Thank you.
And with the Women's Academy that just happened last weekend, it sounds like we might get some of those women to apply, and that's a program I would like to see continue. I have already talked to Officer Fernandez, I think that's her name, and I am personally signing up for the next Women's Police Academy. So
thank you, ma'am. You'd be a great ambassador for the program and for the department. Thank you. We'll look forward to that one.
Absolutely. We can go on
right.
to 4D.
Right, Ken, I'll run through the rest of the plan real quick. So item 2 is our crime. I know this continues to be a focus for council. I'll do a little bit of good news on this one. Obviously, week over 4-week period over 4-week period, we've had a number of good 4-week periods in terms of motor vehicle theft, seeing reductions in terms of the prior 4-week period. So the recent trend has been a decline in motor vehicle thefts. Unfortunately, overall for the year, we do see a sizable increase on that. And then we had a number of murders in December. We ended the year with an all-time high in terms of number of murders. So we will probably be coming back to you all with a more detailed briefing on crime later in the year in terms of how we ended that and some strategies to continue to address that. So those are our crime stats in terms of that. Any questions on 2? Item 3 is our youth violence. We just had a pretty detailed briefing in terms of that, so I think you understand where we're going with that. So any questions on that? Seeing none, you then item 4 is making sure that we get fully staffed in terms of our crisis response team. We, as you know, did RFP. We've selected a new vendor, and then I'll ask Commander Lanigan or Courtney to provide a quick update in terms of where we're at with that, with getting our new clinicians on board.
Hi, good morning, Council. In the interest of time, I will go pretty quickly through this, but I do have significant updates. Out of all of the 9 clinical positions that have been posted, we have filled 5. There are 2 offers in pending. There are 2 interviews scheduled for the next 2 weeks, so that will be full staffed if all of those offers and interviews are extended. The current staff are 3 licensed clinicians, 1 who is provisionally licensed, additional to those 3, and then 1 case manager. We did retain 2 staff from the Aurora Mental Health to UC Health transition, so we're very excited about that. The pending positions are our targeted violence prevention clinician, 1 more CRT clinician, and then the 2 interviews are for an AMRT clinician and our TVP case coordinator, which is our targeted violence prevention program. 3 staff did begin onboarding this week, 2 of those being our retained staff, so they will be up and operational as of today, so they are business as usual. Our other clinician that we onboarded this week does have experience as a co-responder, so that is exciting stuff. We are attracting candidates who have been doing this work in this very niche field, so that is significant for us. My last update is regarding some legislation that's coming from the Behavioral Health Administration with the state. They are revising their 2765, CRS 2765, which is the emergency treatment of those with mental health crisis. And I am monitoring this closely to see how these will affect our programs. As of right now, we're not anticipating any drastic changes, but legal and I are keeping track of this, as well as I am talking to the BHA regularly. And that's all I have. And I'll open it up for questions.
And that's good for the clinician side. Chief Lanigan, anything from the PD side?
No, I have nothing. Courtney always does a great job bringing us up to speed.
Thank you.
Oh, and I will add, sorry, we do have 2 officers that will be coming to the unit on Saturday, the 14th, so we will have full staffing for officers.
Thank you. Then going to section 5 is our homeless cleanups. You see the numbers in there from our team. So for Emma or Jessica, anything additional to add?
Hello, Council. I just have a couple quick updates. We had our previous homeless abatement coordinator, who was Brant Vansickle. He recently had his last day. He had turned in his 2 weeks notice at the end of December, and his last day was what was that? January 2nd, I think. We were very quick in rehiring, and we have our new abatement coordinator on. His name is Bryce Settlemeyer. He's already up and running and posting camps and doing abatements. Yesterday, he completed abatements along Parker and 225. He did the whole 225 corridor. And then today, he is off completing a lot more, doing Cottonwood Park and a few places off of 7th Circle. So he's up and running, and hopefully we'll be getting him up to the same pace that we had been going within, hopefully by February. It just takes a little bit of time to get your footing under. But he's doing a great job so far. We are also in the process of working on hiring a second person to help Bryce. That position, we are in the process of getting it up in Workday for the requisition, so it's not posted yet. Once it's posted, I'll let you all know, and you can share it out with anyone who might be interested. And hopefully that will get us even more efficient in abatements and in processing complaints and requests from your constituents. And that is my update for now. Any questions for me?
Okay. Seeing none, ma'am, that's the end of the Public Safety Action Plan update. Going to the next item, just to keep things moving. You all, it's self-explanatory. You all are the same committee. This is just a documentation of everything you went through last year. Take any questions you have on that, but I think we always like to kind of document the work you all have done. You all lived it, but any questions?
We're good.
Okay. And the last item is for you, ma'am. Just tell us what you'd like to address this year, and then we'll start getting that staffed and resourced. So this is really for you all to lay out items you'd like to see covered in the coming year.
Councilmember Sundberg, Zvonek, is there anything that you would like to specifically address?
I do not yet.
I think for me, and I've mentioned this to a couple of others, is really looking at if we have a charter review committee in place, and are there changes that need to be made in our charter to help us when it comes to hiring. It just goes back to our first action item was to ensure that our department is fully staffed. I know there are some legacy laws in our charter that potentially limit our ability to get laterals, which is why I asked that question earlier. So I think that just going through from the police side, and then even with this this focused deterrence program, are there state laws? Are there other policies at the city level? I think just being very intentional and looking for barriers, policy barriers that are in place that are preventing us from keeping our community safe. Because I do believe that, and I understand that a lot of them are state. We've had offender-friendly legislature for far too long that have made all of our communities less safe. But I want to see the city take a position openly opposing and calling for the amending of some of these laws. So I just think having a clear understanding from law enforcement, from our agency and our officers of what we need to be focused on.
Yeah, and just to echo that, if we could get some of that input as far as policy from the officers that are sort of boots on the ground, because they call me directly a lot of times and say, hey, we need your help. The latest call I got was about needing an ordinance regarding shopping carts, involving the homeless and how, that's dealt with. So I get these kind of calls all the time from the officers, the lower ranking that are on the ground. So if we could establish a way to get more input about policy from some of those officers, I would really appreciate that.
Understood, ma'am.
I think that's it for that agenda item. For agenda item 5, for miscellaneous matters for consideration, Pete Schulte, are you on the line now?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you very quickly explain to the public why Nate Meyer has been able to promote?
Yes, Chair. What I can say is we are kind of bound by the events that took place back in 2018, 2019, when the incident occurred with now Agent Meyer. He was demoted from agent to officer as part of the result of that incident back then with the alleged DUI. My understanding is that there was a critical report done, obviously, about how the PD back then handled that situation, which limited the ability for the DA's office, for George's office, and for other people to actually go forward on a DUI charge. So the end result was a demotion, which under our current civil service rules, if anybody wants to promote again from officer to agent or for any other rank, there has to be at least 2 years from the signing of the disciplinary order before they can actually sit to take the test. And for agent, it's an exam. There is no assessment center. There's nothing else. If you take the test and you perform well, which Agent Meyer did, he was 3rd on the list. Our charter is very clear, and I'll read this to you. It is Article 3-17 of our Civil Service Rules. It's subsection 3, and it says, the commission shall submit to the appointing authority, which would be the police department, the list with the names of all the members who have satisfactorily passed the entire examination in the order in which their grades place them, and the appointing authority, again, the police department, after having received the list duly certified, shall make promotions therefrom in order in which they appear. So the charter also allows there to be the Civil Service Commission to set requirements for promotion, which is in the rules, right? That you cannot have any discipline within 2 years of actually having the test actually administered. So what we were left with, and this came up, this came up in December with the chief's office when they asked for legal advice from us because of the issues that had surrounded Nate Meyer. Was he eligible to test? And yes, under our charter, there's nothing that we could do to prevent him from taking the position that he wanted to take the test. And if he performed, then he would get promoted. As you guys have never heard, right? Chief Acevedo and I are both from Texas, right? And I know that shocks everybody that I say that, but there are other states, including Texas, that have the ability for a couple things. One is called a chief bypass, where in the charter, if we amended the charter to say that the chief of police, if he or she has a reason to skip somebody on the list, then they could skip a promotion and move to the next person in line, but then they would be subject to review by the Civil Service Commission. There's also ways that you can do what's called the rule of 3, where you can take the first 3 and you have 1, 2, and 3, and the command staff and the chief of police pick 2 of the 3 to promote, and that person that they choose not to promote will keep going down the line. But I want to be clear that, the charter is what limited what we could do in this situation. The city didn't make any mistakes, and the Civil Service Commission didn't make any mistakes. It's just one of those issues where he met the requirements and he decided to take the test. And that's where we are.
Perfect. Thank you for that explanation, Pete. It's very unfortunate that Nate Meyer is still an officer with the Aurora Police Department. It's very unfortunate how the entire situation was handled in the first place by the former deputy police chief, which, by the way, I believe I did call him out as a problem in the past. So I'm happy to see that he's at least not with the department anymore. This is unfortunate that Nate Meyer continues to hold a black eye over this department and continue to bring shame. But the rules are the rules, and he didn't lose his job. And these are the rules, and they were followed. It sounds like he is being promoted. In my opinion, the right thing to do, Nate Meyer, would be to turn down this promotion. But of course, that is up to you. You passed the test. This is just simply how I feel. But we will seek to change the rules, as Mr. Schulte just explained what the current rules are that protect this sort of bad behavior, criminal behavior in the department. So we will seek to change those rules. That is about all I have to say about that. I want to confirm the next meeting, and I want to say also I talked to my colleagues, and we have agreed that from here on out, this meeting will be in person. So we will go back in person. I believe the next meeting would be Thursday, February 9th. Is that what you have?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and we need to make the time just for, kids' schedules and stuff. It'll be at 9 a.m. start time.
Okay. We'll secure a room in City Hall and publish that for those to attend so that folks know the physical location.
Yeah, and it needs to be in person. I'm not interested in some sort of hybrid option. If someone can't make it, they simply can't make it.
Understood.
Perfect. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.